From the pit lane for a reason I don't know, to be honest. He's obviously had some sort of a problem and he will be getting away last of all, the rule being that you are not allowed to exit the pit lane very sensibly until the whole field has got away into the first corner. And Michele Alboreto was starting 15th on the grid, so he has in effect lost 10 places at the beginning of the race. As you look at Ayrton Senna now waiting to lead the other 24 competitors for the San Marino Grand Prix around the parade lap, the assembly lap of this 3.132 mile circuit. It's a responsible job because Senna...
Welcome back to Imola, where in a couple of minutes time the parade lap will be run, and there's Eric Bernard in his Ligier waiting. John on pole position, Ayrton Senna, alongside him Michael Schumacher. A long sprint into that first corner.
Well, that sprint down into the Tossa hairpin is really going to be about horsepower. But the thing I was talking about a few moments ago, which is, as Keke Rosberg saying, "Hi Keke, good to see you back here at the Grand Prix circuit. Congratulations for your race at Hockenheim." But it's that slow parade lap. In Japan, for the Pacific Grand Prix, the ambient temperature wasn't quite as high as it is here. But because the speed is quite a lot lower, tire temperatures drop. Now the cars here are running quite a lot less downforce than they did do in the Japan and Pacific Grand Prix in Japan. But fortunately, on the start all the way down to Tossa, the speed is so high, the downforce is pretty high at those high speeds. So energy and therefore heat should get into the tire very quickly indeed. And let's hope that by the time all the cars make it down to the hairpin bend, they all get into the corner cleanly, and equally importantly, all get out of it cleanly.
So we've just seen the Drivers' Championship on our screen. Of course, Michael Schumacher leading that, 20 points. Rubens Barrichello second in the championship. Of course, he's not racing here after his shunt on Friday afternoon. And there we see the Constructors' World Championship. Benetton, Ferrari, and then Jordan in third. Fourth is Williams, Renault. Fifth, equal, is Footwork and Sauber. And then it's Tyrrell and LaRousse, the last two teams that have scored a point. But for the Drivers' Championship, Barrichello 7 points, 13 points behind Michael Schumacher. And then it's Damon Hill and Gerhard Berger. They're equally third position. The grid, we're looking at it from the helicopter at the moment. We've seen the front row of the grid. It's his 65th pole position for Ayrton Senna. Then it's Michael Schumacher alongside him on the front row for the 5th time Michael Schumacher has qualified on the front row. Then on the second row, Damon Hill and Gerhard Berger. Then it's JJ Leto and Nicola Larini on the third, both their best qualifying position ever. Frentzen and Häkkinen. Then it's Katayama, equaling his best qualifying performance, and Carl Wendlinger. Morbidelli and Blundell on the next row, and then it's Martin Brundle and Pierluigi Martini. The next two rows then with Alboreto, Fittipaldi, Eric Bernard and Eric Comas. And there's one Ligier driver and the next Ligier driver on that row, while Johnny Herbert and Oliver Panis occupy the 10th row of the grid. Then it's Pedro Lamy, Andrea de Cesaris, David Brabham and Oliver Beretta, while Bertrand Gachot is the 25th car to start the race. Paul Belmondo could have started if he wanted to, but he declined the invitation.
Well, Ayrton Senna has got the coveted pole position, but more importantly, the pole position is on the side of the track, which is his preference, unlike in Japan, where he felt that he was at a disadvantage from starting on the right-hand side of the track. Here at Imola for the San Marino Grand Prix, he is on what I would describe as the racing line, and it is Michael Schumacher in second place on the grid, who is on the dirty part of the track. So let's see what happens.
There we see the 30-second board being taken away. Then we will be shown the green flag, and then the cars will follow the pace car. On the right we see Ayrton Senna. Yellow flag being waved, the green flag is now being waved. And that's the cameraman, the brave cameraman in the middle of the track, who is seeing cars pass by. And John, the people starting on the last row of the grid are actually quite fast by the time they go past the man with that camera.
well, probably doing over 100 miles an hour. But again, of course, to a driver at this point, it seems like 10 miles an hour. And well, that's the case on this parade lap. The cars are still probably doing 140, 50 miles an hour coming down into the Tossa hairpin bend. And they still think that, you know, they're probably just 2,000-3,000 revs short of peak power. It's like a walking pace to them.
Well, going to the Acqua Minerale chicane. Well, John, what amazed me, it hasn't been very busy here on the Friday and Saturday, but today the place is absolutely packed with people.
I think a lot of that is a response to Gerhard Berger and Nicola Larini's performances, and to Ferrari for providing them with cars that are becoming more competitive. And really that's what the Italian fans want to come to see. Of course, Ferraris are built not a million miles from the Imola circuit, and of course the circuit is named after Enzo and Dino Ferrari. So this is, if you like, the home racetrack for the Ferrari team.
Well, the car's going very slowly. Eddie Irvine joined us in the commentary booth. Eddie, what are you doing on a lap like this?
Well, basically you're just, trying to check everything, get the tires up to temperature and get your brakes up to temperature, because these brakes just don't work at all whenever they're not very, very hot. So you're making sure them things are done and just checking everything and running through the start of the race in your head. And what I do is just try and keep as calm as possible, really concentrating, keeping calm, and that's the main thing.
Well,
it's Ayrton Senna on the right of your screen. It is Michael Schumacher on the left, and it is going to be 61 laps around a very warm Imola circuit. There we see the last car on the grid, the Silver Pacific of Bertrand Gachot, the green flag. Now the 5-second board is up. The red light will go on any second now. There it is, and it's go! And a reasonable start. Oh, someone stole it. It's JJ Leto who stole this car, and someone run into it.
Pedro Lamy, I think, yes it is. Pedro Lamy came from behind, absolutely flat out, and hit the back of JJ Leto's static car. And again, more problems for this San Marino Grand Prix. JJ Leto out of his car, completely unhurt. Pedro Lamy out of his car, completely unhurt. But Lamy, who came from 12th row of the grid, 11th row of the grid, doing again maybe 100 miles an hour, was unsighted, ran into the back, and you can see, look at the damage to the back of that Benetton. That is, well, again, a testament to the strength of Grand Prix cars. Both drivers completely uninjured, but I think we're going to see the possibility, a red flag coming out, because to clear that car, which is basically just off the racing line as the cars accelerate down towards the Tamburello corner. Of course, you can see right at the top of your screen where Pedro Lamy's car, that's the distance that car travelled on two wheels. Let's watch it again from behind. Pedro Lamy, you will see, go from right across to the left. Leto's car static. Well, Pedro Lamy unsighted by a car behind, ahead of him, and then, well, almost, that was almost a repeat of what happened many, many years ago in the Canadian Grand Prix, and bits and parts of the car up into the air.
And actually, John, we hear cars backing off on the straight now. The replay. Now, I wonder, I don't think we'll see a red flag. I think we'll see the safety car being brought out.
Well, here we are back with live pictures. That is Pedro Lamy's. The yellow flag is out all around the circuit. And Senna did keep the lead. The safety car is on the circuit, and this is going to be a number of laps before both those cars and the debris around the circuit can be cleared up. Well, starts are always dramatic, but that's as dramatic a start to a Grand Prix as we have seen for a long time indeed. But we're pleased to be able to say that JJ Leto and Pedro Lemmy, who were involved in that start line shunt, both out of their cars, both unhurt, but a lot of debris around the track, and that's going to take a few moments to be cleared away to allow this Grand Prix to continue.
Eddie, it's probably less nerve-wracking driving in a Grand Prix than watching this on television.
I don't know, that was a very frightening situation there. Pedro he just got the car turned just at the very last minute and was able to avoid a head-on accident into the back of the Benetton there. He's a very, very lucky chap.
Well, here we see it again. This is the front view of the lights going to green, and more or less instantly JJ Lehto's hands go up. Frentzen dives to the right to get around him, but Pedro Lamy on the left of your screen is going to come across to the right, is unsighted by another car, and you see him coming across the track, almost runs full into the rear of Lehto's Benetton Ford, bits of the car clearing debris fence, debris everywhere, and then Pedro Lamy's car continues across the track, spinning in front of Bertrand Gachot, oil, water, bits of carbon fibre. Well, after a great weekend for JJ Lehto to have his return to Formula One end up like that is disappointing in the extreme, and also, of course, for the Benetton team, who were so delighted to get JJ back into the car and to be so competitive in his first race.
While all the drivers are behind the safety car, it's Ayrton Senna leading that in front of Michael Schumacher, Gerhard Berger, Damon Hill, Heinz-Harald Frentzen 5th, and Mika Hakkinen 6th. And Frentzen, John, made a very good start indeed, and Larini, back to 7th, has fallen back a little bit.
Well, Frentzen was the car we saw moving very sharply. He was directly behind JJ Lehto, and in fact did extremely well to be able to get out and not collect the cars that would have been coming down the right-hand side of the circuit.
And number 23, Michele Alboreto, has been in the pits to check out on a couple of things, and he's back 23rd and last.
Well, this is normally the scene of the first lap incident that Tossa happened. And still under the safety car. And drivers, what you see them doing is trying to retain the heat that they got in the tyres during that first lap. At these very low speeds, heat dissipates quickly. So when it comes to the restart, the more heat you are, the better your traction is, the better the road holding will be as you go through Tamburello for the first time, flat out, and then as you make it down through the Villeneuve curve into Tossa, that very tight second gear hairpin bend.
John, this is not very good, I mean, for the engines, is it really, running at fairly low speed?
Well, at low speed you must also run at pretty low engine revs, because these engines, when you rev them, get extremely hot. So it's important not to run in very low gears. Use the higher gears and keep the revs low, so as with the limited amount of air that will be going through the air boxes into the radiators, you don't get into an overheating situation. It's important a driver keeps an eye on that. Certainly the team will be able to tell what is happening, and they can talk to the driver and make him aware that he may have a problem with his engine getting too warm.
We're starting lap 4 when we come round to start finish. The lights on the safety car are still on, and if I remember right, Eddie, that's got to be out for a lap before you can have a restart. He's nodding.
Well, this is very difficult, in fact, for a driver, because the pace the safety car is running at is probably about on the limit for the safety car, but in fact it's very, very slow for these cars, and at the time when a driver, he's basically got settled by the time the lights go red, and then you've got to get built back up again. And Eddie, have you ever been in a situation like this where you've had the start of a race and then within a lap the safety cars come out, you've had to recompose yourself and then get your motivation built back up again?
No, I've actually never done the safety car procedure before. It's new in Formula One, and in sports cars, when I race them, we never actually had a situation, so I don't know what it's like.
I can't see anything being left on the circuit at the moment. So if we have a look at the safety car, I think this could well be the last lap the safety car will be run. And when we get a closer look at it, we will see whether that's true or not. Also, you see the yellow flags. Once the safety car is off the circuit, that'll be the green flag. Actually, John, this is what happens. I mean, I wouldn't say it happens fairly often, but it's a quite a natural reaction for a driver like Pedro Lamy does to do. He sees everybody slow up a little bit, think there's a gap on the left, but there wasn't.
Well, I think the word you've used, think, is the operative word, and it is a very difficult thing. The car that blinded or unsighted Pedro Lamy, I think, was Olivier Panis or Andrea de Cesaris. One of those two cars were on the left-hand side. But you always have to be aware that, particularly starting from the back, things can happen in front of you, and you may not be aware of them. You can't win the Grand Prix from the back row of the grid in the first 100 yards. And sometimes what appears to be an opportune gap is there for a very good reason, and that's because everybody else is avoiding a static car. You've got to think all the time when you're in a Grand Prix car. You can't take things for granted. You've got to imagine that if there is a gap, it's there for a reason.
Well, if there would have been a restart, it would have been possible for Leto to get in the spare, I suppose, but I think he's back in the motorhome getting changed at the moment, or he might actually just gone to the medical centre to check on his neck, because he did get a fairly hefty thump from behind.
Yes, indeed, I would think that would be a very sensible thing. Well, there,
Martini.
Yes, one of the two Minardi Fords in problems. And one more lap under the safety car.
John, we're on lap 5 out of 61. If we carry on for many more laps behind the safety car, it might be that people that were planning on 3 stops will have to change their plan a little bit.
Well, I would think all the team managers and all the technicians that come to Grand Prix now will be working frantically. Let's look again, as you see. And that's the other view. Well, that bit of bodywork landed on the top, safely away from spectators. And that was probably a little bit of a brake duct, something made out of carbon fibre, but Pedro Lamy's car certainly travelled a long distance from the point of contact, of course, completely without brakes and virtually without steering.
On the pace car, so it looks...
Caught out a little bit by that start, because there's a very big gap. Damon's in front of Heinz-Harald Frentzen and then Mika Häkkinen.
And Michael Schumacher closed up onto Ayrton Senna under braking into Tosa. And really those two got their full advantage. Of course, everybody else was still streaming around the back of the circuit before Senna and Schumacher realized things were underway. So the field has been strung out much more considerably than had we had a normal standing start.
Well, if drivers would make 2 pit stops, I think you have a 61-lap race in 3 segments of 20 laps each. So I think we can expect drivers in around 15, 16 laps from now. We're on lap 6 out of 61, and basically all the laps so far has been behind the safety car.
Well, Schumacher really trying to keep in contact as much as possible, and it's on this part of the circuit where Benetton feel his advantage lies. It's now here onto the start of the straight where Senna's got the advantage. He's got more horsepower. He's going to use it. He's going to try and get his way down through Tamburello. This is the long, flat out left-hand corner, 190 miles an hour, and Senna's in trouble. Senna just out of the corner of the screen. The Williams turned right. It had gone through the corner. It was clearly in control. Then all of a sudden, the car, let's watch it again. Here you see Senna coming through the corner already. The car is just going off the racetrack now. Impossible. And that impact, again, a massive impact. We've seen this happen 3 times at this San Marino Grand Prix this weekend. First with Rubens Barrichello. Second, tragically, for Roland Ratzenberger, and now Ayrton Senna hits the wall virtually at unabated speed.
And that's the point where I think Gerhard Berger went off, John, a couple of years ago.
Berger went off, and well, we don't know the circumstances of Senna's accident at this point, but certainly when Berger went off, he hit the wall very, very hard. I think, in fact, it was maybe a little earlier in the corner, but nonetheless, this Tamburello corner, it is flat out. It's 190 miles an hour, and if you have a problem there and go off on the outside of the circuit, there are those retaining walls, but they're hard, they are concrete, and you saw how unyielding the impact was. But the car bounced off, and a lot of energy was dissipated in the first contact. But again, Professor Watkins and the medical team here in San Marino working on Senna, trying to stabilize. We saw movement from his head, so that's a very positive indication. But yet again, really, I've never been to a Grand Prix as a competitor or in a role as a commentator where I've seen so much. I don't know, I'm just running a loss of words. Michael Schumacher out of the car. His car stopped on the start-finish line, and this really most sad and dramatic weekend for Formula One. And now again, doctors, helmet off, Professor Watkins
with Ayrton Senna. It's the third big accident, as John said, during this Grand Prix weekend with Formula One cars, and there we have a look into the Williams garage. And they are very anxious to know what happened with their car, and I think, John, also Damon Hill would really like to know what happened here.
Well, we've seen three, absolutely awful accidents this weekend. We've also seen a lot of cars spinning throughout the weekend. Now, in the case of Rubens Barrichello, Rubens accepted responsibility for his accident. We don't know yet what was the cause of the tragic accident for Roland Ratzenberger, and equally now with Ayrton Senna, the car had just entered the corner, was coming up to close to apex and then onto the exit, and the car just failed to take it. In fact, from the backward view that I saw, it appeared to me that the car just suddenly started to veer to the right, and the man that really would have had the best sight of it would have been Michael Schumacher, who was probably only 5 or 6 car lengths behind.
John, I can't remember a Grand Prix where we had so many stoppages as this weekend, to be honest. Well, again, we're looking into the Williams garage. There's the spare car, which is not being used for this race, and there again, the scene of the accident. A lot of medical people in attendance. Sid Watkins very close to Ayrton Senna, probably talking to him. And let's just wait and see what's happened, or this is going to take a long time to restart. So I don't know what Perez wants to be doing, but there's not a lot of things happening here for the next God knows how many minutes. There's the Williams mechanics. Well, that must be dreadful, John.
Well, in fact, we've seen the helicopter, I think, is coming in. The medical helicopter has landed now on the circuit, and Ayrton Senna is going to be transferred, I think, directly to the judgment by Professor Watkins and the medical team here at the San Marino circuit. That is the best steps to take. And again, looking into the Williams pits, it's always a very difficult moment for a team when they've had an incident like this on and around the circuit. So the team working away, and very quickly he'll be transferred into the ambulance that's waiting, then taken to the helicopter and taken to the safety of Bologna to the hospital there.
Well, Keke Rosberg just walked in to tell us that with JJ Leto everything is okay. So that is some positive news, and we're awaiting news, I should say, on what happened to Ayrton Senna's car, if we can find that out, and what's happened to Ayrton Senna himself.
Well, the helicopter we see there on the circuit waiting, and the various forms of stretcher that they use, and now there's a saline drip has been applied. That's just to act as a stabilizer. So work being carried out by the side of the track by the medical team at Imola, and this is a part of the circuit where, in fact, on a number of occasions we've seen very severe, spectacular accidents. Way back, I think in '87, Nelson Piquet, when he was driving for the Williams team, went off and hit the wall. Gerhard Berger did it, Michele Alboreto did it. So it is a part of the circuit which is tremendous from a driver's point of view. But of course, at the very, very high speeds that Grand Prix cars are capable of, plus the amount of downforce and grip that a car does generate. Now, if something goes wrong in the corner where you've got that very high speed with a very high load, and for some reason that load disappears quickly, then that's when a driver does have a big problem.
John, we talked about this all yesterday with Dave Price, and again we see the survival cell of that car being absolutely intact.
Yes, indeed, and the car has done its job superbly. An impact of that speed, I mean, the figures, I don't even know, I wouldn't even want to guess the kind of G-force that initial impact would have generated, but it would have been extremely high, believe me. But of course, the part of a driver that appears to become much, much more vulnerable, and has certainly been the case this year, is the area around the neck, and that's the area I'm sure that everybody is very concerned about at this present time. Now, Eddie Irvine, you were doing a test with the Jordan team earlier in the season at Manicourt, and you went backwards at pretty high speed into a wall. You got a bit of a whiplash, but you didn't have any really severe injury that prevented you from getting back into the car.
No, I was very lucky because I'm quite tall, so my back was the whole way along the back of the monocoque, and my head was actually touching the monocoque, so there was no way of whiplash or anything like that. But some of the guys, they aren't quite as tall, and they sit a bit further forward in the car, so when the car goes in backwards, it's a big problem for them because they don't really, their head's going to move a bit, and that bit can be quite important.
John, this is ridiculous. I mean, how can that LaRousse get out of the pits when there's a red flag?
Well, I'm gobsmacked. I think that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen at any time in my life, that a Grand Prix car is allowed, when the course is under a red, everybody is stopped on the pit lane, and Comas and the LaRousse has driven out, and he drove out. We heard him leaving the pits at pretty much full speed, and he came around Tamburello corner. I mean, this is the most bizarre weekend at a Grand Prix I can remember. I mean, I don't want to make any more comment because I'm sure I'll say something that's incorrect.
Ayrton Senna, I think, pretty much being transferred straight into the helicopter, and then probably be as careful as I can. John, even if they in the slightest possible way suspect any neck damage, they are oh so careful with you, aren't they?
Yes, indeed. It's a very vulnerable part of the human body, and of course, in just withdrawing a driver from the cockpit of a car, that in itself has got to be done extremely carefully. And it often is the case where in an incident, and when marshals arrive in their desire to help a driver as quickly as possible, in fact, it's better not to do anything until the specialists arrive. The simple task of removing a helmet in itself is not necessarily a simple task. Of course, all the marshals are equipped with knives to cut through the strap that retains the helmet, but it is something that needs to be done with great knowledge and care to ensure that if there is an injury to the spine or to the neck, that there isn't any residual injury in addition.
Well, if we look at the right front corner, John, is completely taken off the car. I don't think Ayrton got hit by something like a wheel, which apparently was the case in Roland's accident.
I think, again, it's only speculative. We don't know enough. We haven't seen from the camera angles precisely, first of all, what caused the car to go off the circuit. And secondly, the camera view from looking up to Tamburello, the car actually was out of sight. But one thing is for sure, that with the construction of these current cars, while the driver in the safety cell is kept very safe, if you take off the wheels and suspension in that corner, it is possible in a very severe impact for the wheel to come into contact with the driver's head, or the wall, in fact, to come into contact. So we don't know, and it is very, very speculative indeed to consider what may or may not have been the question. So we are sitting here looking at something which is indeed very serious, and it is not right for us to speculate on the extent of the injuries to Senna, or in fact what was the cause of the accident in the first place.
There's in the case of this accident and the case of Ratzenberger's and Barrichello's accident, John, I think I found it remarkable, and that neither of the three cars we've seen having an accident, also with JJ and Pedro, which, I mean, those cars were torn apart basically, none of them caught fire.
Again, part of the safety cell that the fuel tank is in is an extremely strong cell, again, because of development over many, many years, and a history of a car crashing, it nearly always caught fire. Well, now we see Senna is being transferred to the medical helicopter, and this is going to be, I think, a flight straight to Bologna, to the hospital. And of course, he's received a great deal of attention from the medical team here, the doctors, from Professor Watkins. And we see Professor Watkins walking with Senna as he's being transferred now to be flown immediately to Bologna.
Well, John, we're all speculating about the accident. Could there be any possibility that the drivers say enough's enough?
I think that, again, is an area where I don't want to get into. It is a Grand Prix, and there are many factors involved in Grand Prix racing. I think certainly after the weekend that we have seen so far this weekend, it's going to be difficult for a number of people. The desire, the heart, the spirit to drive may have waned considerably. Well, very shortly, Ayrton Senna is going to be leaving the Imola circuit, and taken very quickly indeed. Bologna is some 30 kilometers from the Imola racetrack, and there will be a medical team waiting for him as soon as that helicopter lands at the hospital.
With Ayrton Senna being taken away in the helicopter, I think there we watch Mika Häkkinen. Well, there was a smile on his face just before this race, but there's not much of a smile at the moment. Thumbs up for the helicopter pilot. He can take off, and we'll go full speed to the Maggiore Hospital in Bologna.
Here we see from Schumacher. Now there's the camera view. Suddenly Senna's car, there's marks on the ground, but that's where cars have been bottoming. And the car just, a little after the apex, just began to turn right. No chance whatsoever for Senna to do anything about recovery. Again, the right front and right rear of the car taking a massive impact, but again, it's the front of the car that is the danger zone for the driver, because of with that wheel being compressed. Now here is the view. This is from Damon Hill as he came round in the sister car to Senna, and you can see the initial impact from the dust and then the debris, and that's the distance that Senna's car travelled before finally, again, probably something like 200 meters or more across the road. Bodywork, bits of suspension, of course lots of dust and general debris, and a pretty appalling sight for Damon Hill to be faced with.
There we see the helicopter shot. Oh, well, back to Michael Schumacher in replay, and well, it just didn't turn left anymore, John, halfway through the corner.
Just through the corner, the car had left hand locked down to go through a left hand corner, and then just after that dark patch in the road, you can see the cars have been bottoming, and in fact Senna's car, we noticed in qualifying, was bottoming through that, but there's nothing obvious that I can say indicates went wrong. It just appears that suddenly, instead of continuing the path to the left, the car began to straighten up and headed for the outside of the circuit. At this point now, something has gone wrong. You can't see the picture. It needs an enhancement to be able to give you a clearer view. Certainly Michael Schumacher would have a pretty good idea what the cause of that, to us, mysterious deviation off the track would have been. And that impact, I mean, really, speed was undiminished from the point in the corner. As I say, 190 miles an hour is about the speed, and really virtually no dissipation at all. That didn't look to me as if they even had a chance to get on the brakes. There was no sign of tyre smoke.
There's little point in taking it back to the garage. So again, a scene of activity on the grid at Imola, but people here will have increasingly less aptitude to watch the reformed race. Is bound to be concerned.
Yes, now assuming that the race is indeed restarted, what will happen now is that the full race distance will be, it'll actually going to be, we've just heard actually it's going to be 53 laps for the balance of the race, and one would expect the first part.
Welcome back here on Eurosport. Welcome back to Imola, where we are waiting the restart of the San Marino Grand Prix. If you've missed the first, well, nearly 45 minutes now, or 40 minutes now, sorry, of this Grand Prix, we've had a start line incident involving JJ Leto, who did not get away, and Pedro Lamy, who ran into the stationary car. Then we ran 4 laps behind a safety car, and on the second lap we were racing again. A terrible accident with Ayrton Senna, who is now being taken to hospital by the helicopter, and all remaining drivers on the grid, team personnel, journalists in the press room, and of course TV commentators. We are all waiting on things that are going to happen now.
Well, everybody back on the grid, and the team's preparing for a restart to this very unfortunate San Marino Grand Prix. And you know, people that came round after Senna's accident, there was undoubtedly a lot of debris on the track, and pieces of carbon fibre. They've got to check very carefully indeed that none of those little shards have gotten into the airbox or the radiators or around suspension or lodged somewhere. That in itself could cause a problem. But really a very tense moment now for everybody, and it's an uncomfortable feeling to see, you know, an accident of that nature, and then, as you asked me earlier, Allard, to get back into the car. It does take the heart out of a Grand Prix driver.
There's Mika Häkkinen's car on the grid. Sorry, Martin Brundle's car on the grid. Gianni Morbidelli taking off his helmet. Tyre warmers around the tyres. Now, John, with that amount of debris on the circuit, would you go and run with the same set of tyres if you would have a choice? Would you say, listen, let's just put a new set on?
Well, I think Goodyear would be very carefully recommending a team to stick with the same set of tyres or change. It depends very much, I think, part of the track that you were at the time the incident occurred. And many of the people towards the back of the field would have been well aware and would have had a chance to slow down and pick their way through much more carefully than those people who were immediately behind Senna's Williams when he went off. So I think that a combination of the team's natural care and Goodyear's responsibility to the tyre, or to the teams as the tyre supplier, will ensure that nobody will do anything that is not 100% certain.
There's Gerhard Berger, and Gerhard is getting his helmet back on. Well, and there's a Williams, and there's Damon Hill's car. Now, there's no sign of Damon. He will probably, John, I assume Damon would be in the back of his, or in the garage, in the Williams garage, and talking to all the engineers, well, Patrick Haddon, Adrian Newey, Frank Williams, to what's the plan.
Well, obviously a team is very concerned to understand what went wrong. One of the advantages of the electronics, the level of electronics that is now available to a racing team, is they've got data logging, and they can run through that logging and get an indication of the part or the area of the car where the trouble began. So they, I'm sure, are running through that as quickly as possible to determine what it was that caused Senna so inexplicably to go right when the corner was going left. So the advantage of data logging is something that teams today are able to provide, first of all, for their own knowledge, but also to the press in general. And in fact, going back to Ruben Barrichello's accident on Friday when he came through the Marlborough chicane just before start-finish straight, the team could tell us that he was actually 13 kilometers per hour faster at that part of the circuit than at any time over the 2 days of practice and qualifying. The back of the car in that particular moment stepped out, and at the same time as it did, he was actually back on the throttle and accelerating. So in the dark old days of mechanical engineering, that knowledge would not have been available, and it helped certainly us at Eurosport clear up the cause of Ruben Barrichello's shunt.
There's work being done on the engine of Martin Brundle's car, and for Peugeot, John, it was a challenge to finish this race. We heard it being said just before, or on the grid actually. Now it's very hot. Their main problem, I think, has been that the engine produced so much heat that it didn't function properly.
Well, what they've been doing at McLaren is working on the cooling system, and that's radiator sizes as well as the air intakes around those radiators. That's a very vital part of the design of a car. Also the actual engine installation itself, the water system, because these cars run radiators in parallel. There's a radiator for water on both sides. So to if you like, refine the system, you can gain a great deal in terms of efficiency.
Well, there's an engine that produces a lot less heat, an HP engine in the back of the footwork.
I think looking at Peugeot, one of the changes for the engineers is that when they ran this V10 engine in their very successful Le Mans winning sports cars, a sports car has got a lot more space around it. It's, by definition, it's a wider car. So the air, the heat that's coming off exhaust pipes and off the actual engine block and cylinder head unit itself has got more space to dissipate and therefore to bleed away from the car itself. But in a Grand Prix car, everything is so well packaged, there is no spare space whatsoever.
Well, there's Bernie Eccleston talking to Gerhard Berger, and they're obviously discussing what to do. And Gerhard, who's had an accident at Tamarello a couple of years ago, he was at the press conference yesterday. He said it this morning. He said he had mixed feelings about starting the race, and Well, there'll be even more mixed, probably. Now, that's a mechanic in Damon's car. There's Les in Damon's car, and Damon getting his helmet back on. So he will go out and race, and there will be a race.
Well, I'm entirely confident that Williams, the team, Patrick Head and Adrian Newey are aware of what caused Senna's accident, and they can reassure Damon Hill that that situation they have under control. Again, this morning we saw David Brabham and the Simtech Ford team take the decision to run and in fact to race, and extremely difficult situations and circumstances after Roland Ratzenberger died as a result of hitting the wall down near the Tossa hairpin bend part of the circuit.
It looks like checking the gearbox on that Williams, John. Well, more and more drivers getting ready to get back into the car. Now, I want to know what's going to happen to that LaRousse being stranded out on the circuit. I think for what happened there, it should stay there for the remaining of this Grand Prix, to be honest.
Well, I suspect what happened, the car was in the pits at the time the red flag went out. They were doing some repairs to the car, and I imagine that somebody said, well, go out, do the lap and come on to the tail end of the group. But unfortunately, a misjudgment, I think, on the part of the team, and certainly at pit exit, allowed that car to leave much too quickly. And in fact, I suspect what should have happened was the car should have been held at pit exit until the race itself has recommenced, and then start from the very rear.
Well, everybody's getting ready. We're going to take another commercial break here on Eurosport, and we'll be back pretty soon from Imola.
Mayo, that is. And Nicola spends his time at the present moment, in effect, commuting between single-seater driving for Ferrari and touring car driving for Alfa Romeo, the latter with a great deal of success. So, again, the course has been cleared. The track has had any debris that it had on it removed. With one part of the race completed, we will now be starting a second 53-lap race, the results of which will be added to the first short part, which ran over a full 5 laps because the accident happened on the 6th lap, and the result of the San Marino Grand Prix and the allocation of the resultant World Championship points will be decided on an aggregate of the two results. Eddie Jordan on the right, and he's talking to the Team Lotus boss, Peter Collins. Eddie Jordan has had a very tough season. Eddie Irvine, one of his drivers, was, that's Peter Wright, the Lotus chief technician and designer on the left. Eddie Jordan lost the services of Eddie Irvine after the multiple collision in the first race of the year, the Brazilian Grand Prix. Eddie Irvine is here, incidentally. And then Eddie had the Rubens Barrichello crash to contend with, and Andrea De Cesaris, who is substituting for Eddie Irvine, has had a pretty torrid time in the Jordan over practice. He's gone off several times because, to be fair to the attack...
Come back to Imola, and the prancing horse, Nicola Larini. He qualified on the 3rd row of the grid, and awaiting, just like everybody here, all the spectators, everybody at the Autodromo Enzo e Gino Ferrari for the restart of the Grand Prix. Now that race will probably be run, John, over it's 61 minus 54 laps, I would say.
I think your arithmetic will be good enough, Allard, and really now just waiting for the track to be finally cleared. It looks pretty much as though the marshals at that section of circuit have done a very good job, and it'll be a countdown once again until another parade lap, and then this San Marino Grand Prix will once again get underway.
Well, John, just running past our commentary booth was Pedro Lamy going to Portuguese television, and he said that he would come back as soon as he's finished there. So Pedro up and running, and that was probably an impact of well over 100 mile an hour. I mean, 140 maybe?
Certainly around about 100, 120, I would think. And the fortunate part was that just at the very last moment, Pedro Lamy was able to get his car away from the centre of JJ Leto's, and the two suspensions just were plucked off like a wishbone. And again, a lot of energy is dissipated in those moments, but you could see just how far after the impact Lamy's car did go.
So we're on the green flag lap, and then and that's Heinz-Harald Frentzen who's stalled on the green flag lap, and he will have to start at the back of the grid. So more drama for Frentzen. There he is, left on the grid. Now I think that car is still running. I can hear the engine running, so that.
Yes, we can hear it on the rev limiter. Of course, he's going to have to now start from the back of the grid. He will not be allowed to thread his way up onto the grid proper. Well, in fact, it's not. It was somebody else, because there still is Heinz-Harald Frentzen. There was somebody else that we couldn't see. That may have been, in fact, Comas, whose car would have started from the pit lane, but we didn't see that car in our picture. So Frentzen's car still on the start-finish, the part of the grid that he was placed, and now the potential of further delay unless that car can be very quickly pushed off the grid before Michael Schumacher and the rest make the way on to their grid positions.
I make that 22 cars for the restart, John. Unless there's a car which I haven't seen coming round and it's in the garage. But I'll make that 22 so far. The field being led by Michael Schumacher, then Gerhard Berger, and the rest of the field. Now, will this be a race on aggregate? Because the computer still gives the standings after 5 laps, and basically the computer can pick it up whenever it wants to.
And my thoughts are that this will effectively become a two-part San Marino Grand Prix, and part 1 and part 2 will be put together, and at the end of the day we'll have a result.
As we had 2 years ago in France, John, when there was rain and they did a restart of that race. So the restart of the San Marino Grand Prix. No driver on pole position. Well, Michael Schumacher on pole position. Then it's Gerhard Berger, Damon Hill. This is Martin Brundle's car. Martin Brundle's McLaren Peugeot. The red light will go on any second. Now it is on, and we will change the green, and a very good start for Gerhard Berger. And everybody away cleanly, everybody away to Tossa on that very first corner. And there's a lot of jostling going on there.
Well, you know, watching the start of this race, the second start, and Gerhard Berger into the lead, into Tossa. Damon Hill coming down the inside of Michael Schumacher, and well, did Schumacher concede? I doubt it very much. But just watching that restart, you'd have thought as contact with one of the McLarens, I think that was Martin Brundle getting edged out.
And I think that's Damon Hill going back to the pits, John. He has got damage on his Williams Renault. And that means that Michael Schumacher did certainly not concede to Damon Hill. Here we see Damon. Is there any damage? The front wing is flapping about. We can see that. So he'll go back to the pits and pick up a new one, I suppose.
Certainly he'll go back into the pits, and let's see what the team decide to do. certainly the two cars, the Hills, Williams and Schumacher's Benetton, disputing. Damon got almost sufficiently far alongside Schumacher to believe rightly that he had the corner. But Schumacher very, very determined indeed not to let a Williams get in front of him.
Oh, listen to the crowd. It's a Ferrari leading at Imola. It's Gerhard Berger leading this Grand Prix. Now, although Michael Schumacher will probably have the quicker car of the two, John, that red Ferrari is oh so quick down the straight.
And remember back to 2 weeks to the Pacific Grand Prix, Michael Schumacher, when he came up to lap, Gerhard Berger didn't want to overtake. This is a different situation this time.
Well, and it is a two-part race because the computer still has Michael Schumacher leading by 1.4 seconds, and there is Damon Hill. Now, the engine's running, there'll be a new nose cone being put on that car, and talk about a mountain to climb.
In the meantime, Schumacher breathing all over the back of Gerhard Berger, but coming down into the chicane at Acqua Minerale, there really isn't anywhere you can pass. And I don't think Schumacher has to worry very much. He should, if he cannot get a clean shot at passing Berger, just wait. It's a long Grand Prix still. Let Gerhard Berger make all the running. But at the end of the day, for me, Benetton, Ford and Schumacher ought to have the legs.
And Damon Hill leaves the pit, so he is less than a lap behind. He will be in last position, but Damon Hill is in 20th position. Again, watching the Ford graphics, the speed on the bottom right of your screen. Gears, that's first gear. That's surprising. That's first, I think, John.
It certainly is. And of course, the problem now with the cars at Imola, they've got such a high top speed to get an even spread of gear ratios. And Benetton and Ford with the new uprated Z-Tech R were very conscious indeed of making the engine work efficiently at all times. Well, Michael Schumacher very, very tight indeed. Berger ever so late on the brakes. Schumacher did close up, but not sufficiently close to take the chance. And Gerhard Berger, I can assure you, is not going to give a millimetre to Michael Schumacher here at Imola.
Whoa! Pedro Lamy has walked into our commentary booth, and I'm very happy to see you, Pedro. That was a very short Grand Prix and a very frightening accident.
Thank you very much. Yes, was the start very bad for me, but we can't forget because there's many accidents, and now we hope that Senna is okay. In my accident, I just tried to pass on the left side when I saw some space to pass through, and then I had no chance to pass through because JJ was stopped and I couldn't see.
And everything's all right with you, and I suppose everything's all right with JJ as well?
Yes, I talked with JJ. Is everything all right with him? And just he's pain with his arm, but it's okay. In the end, I'm perfect.
And you're back in Monaco?
Yes, for sure.
Thank you very much for dropping in.
Well, John, I'm going to say keep an eye on Schumacher and Berger, because Schumacher is going to try again to pick up the slipstream on the exit of Tamburello, but really very difficult indeed. Berger will not give any space at all. Again, using very cleverly all the track. Schumacher stayed wide on the entry, making a tighter exit to try and pick up speed as they came out of Tosa, up the hill, and again, no chance whatsoever.
Fastest lap of the race so far is by Michael Schumacher, and he's in the 1:25 second bracket, and that is already a new lap record.
Well, cars these days, of course, running with very low fuel capacity, something like the level of fuel they started Grand Prix this year with what would have been 2/3 race distance fuel last year.
Now, John, Benetton and Ferrari, usually two of the teams that are the fastest too when it comes to putting fuel in and changing tires. And although the gap is a second and a half when you look at the computer, I mean, and a new fastest lap now by Damon Hill, incidentally, this is a real motor race. And Eddie, it's good to see it, isn't it?
Yeah, fantastic, actually. Once Senna was out of the race, I thought Michael Schumacher was going to just sort of disappear, but Berger getting a jump on them, it's going to be a great race because Gerhard's as hard as anybody to get past. So I think Michael will maybe just sit behind him the first third of the race and see what happens in the pit stops, because it might be a bit risky to try and overtake Gerhard.
Well, in this situation, as Eddie said, there's very little to gain by a courageous or maybe foolhardy dive down the inside. Michael Schumacher sitting very comfortably indeed, and a lot of motor racing yet. And racing there.
There's some.
Yes, indeed. Morbidelli and Pierluigi Martini, two little men, but with enormous hearts, and they will fight equally difficult or hard for that last piece of track. Again, being Italian drivers here in San Marino Grand Prix, a lot at stake, a lot of pride. But Schumacher closing up under brakes as they now make their way down and start to drop downhill under the bridge into Rivazza corner. So in reality, this is just positioning for Michael Schumacher. He's got to keep close enough to Berger through this part of the circuit that when he does come onto the straight, he's close enough in the first part of the straight to pick up the draft and basically then slingshot out of Tamburello and try and get alongside in the correct part of track as they come down into Tossa. But you can see the gap under acceleration opens up again. Ferrari really have made a lot of progress with this V12 engine.
So it's Michael Schumacher who leads Gerhard Berger by 1.5 seconds. Then in third position, already 12 seconds behind, is Mika Häkkinen. Then Nicola Larini is in fourth. Fifth, Carl Wendlinger. Sixth, Ukio Katayama. In seventh position is Gianni Morbidelli. Eighth, Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Ninth, Christian Fittipaldi. And 10th, Martin Brundle.
Well, battles going on throughout the field, and Heinz-Harald Frentzen just squeezing past Eddie Irvine's replacement, Andrea de Cesaris. And really, I think for a great deal of the drivers here this afternoon, their thoughts are going to be now about finishing rather than being a competitor, particularly in this early part of the race.
Well, Damon Hill crosses start-finish now. And Damon, well, that's the second quicker than anybody else has managed so far. He's 1 minute and 13 seconds behind race leader Michael Schumacher. But, well, we're on lap 12 out of 61. And for Damon, there might just not be enough laps to go very much forward. But Damon Hill proving the Williams is, at the moment, a very quick car indeed.
Well, Schumacher again looking down, but Berger defends, immediately comes to the left. Schumacher goes back to the right now. Has he got the drive? Has he got the traction? Has he got the horsepower? Well, we don't know, because we've gone back to see third place man Häkkinen battling with the second Ferrari of Nicola Larini. Carl Wendlinger fifth. Akio Katayama, who's done a really great job throughout the weekend, in sixth.
There we see Heinz-Harald Frentzen going through the field. And well, to remind you that the order the cars are in might not be the order the cars are actually positioned in the race. We've got a two-part race, so we see Gerhard Berger leading the race on the road, but then Michael Schumacher is leading the race proper. Now, that's all very confusing, and I think we should stop about it, John, and see how much progress Schumacher is actually making. And he's not that much faster than Gerhard Berger, but I'm sure if once he gets past, he will be able to open up a gap.
Now he's closed up under through that chicane. He looked to be a lot quicker into it. The gap to me is marginally less than it was in previous laps. It's just a question of can he get himself close enough on the exit of Tamburello. It's marginal, but certainly he's going to have a sniff. I think this lap all the way, was Berger going to give ground? No, he's not. And he very wisely decided, well, I showed him what I can do, but I'm not going to take the risk on pushing the issue.
Lap times of these two have dropped to mid-25, and it's very, yes, thank you very much, Italian director, but it's obvious that Berger is holding Michael Schumacher up. They're doing mid-25s, while Damon Hill is in the 24s, mid to low 24s.
And Gerhard Berger ran wide coming out of Acqua Minerale. He made an error. Michael Schumacher read it cleverly and clearly. He got his power on. He got the drive out of Acqua Minerale. And thank you very much, Gerhard. You made my life a little bit difficult, but we did put on a great show. for all the Italian race fans here to see a Ferrari leading a Grand Prix. Well, I think the last time we remember seeing it, here is the pass from the rearward view. Schumacher just slid through. I think the last time we saw a car leading, or Ferrari leading, was back in Portugal, 15 glorious laps, when Jean Alesi had his Ferrari in the lead.
In the pits. Michael Schumacher gone straight into the pits. Now that is on lap 12, so that could well be a three-stop race, John.
I just don't know what strategy Benetton have decided to adopt, but they may well have been forced into this particular one because of a certain amount, or the amount of fuel that they were carrying. Now, I did talk to the team prior to the race, and they were indicating, I said, well, look, what would you do if you were Williams? How much fuel would you put into your car if you were Frank Williams? And they thought that they would possibly go for a lower or a smaller fuel amount for the first tyre stop.
Well, here where we see the pass that Michael Schumacher made on Gerhard Berger. Well, we're not going to see it, but Berger is now leading the Grand Prix. And Eddie, I don't know whether you've been involved with any meetings with the Jordan team while we're watching Andrea de Cesaris. What would you have done? Think about a three-stop or a two-stop race?
My personal feeling is that we should always go for three stops, because you can just start with so much less fuel, and the car is just so much lighter at the start of the race, and if there is an opportunity to nip past someone, if you've less fuel on board, it's possible to do it, and it's easier on the tyres. And I feel it's a three-stop race is the way to go, and I think most people seem to be going that way.
Well, in car with Martin Brundle, currently all the way down in 11th, and Martin battling with Pierluigi Martini. As we go back to race leader Gerhard Berger, he lost the lead just over a lap ago when he ran wide in Acqua Minerale. Schumacher took the lead, but in fact then he never was credited on the computer, because he then went straight into the pits. And that red flag being waved at the side of the track is an Italian flag, a Ferrari flag. It is not the flag we've seen out so many times this weekend to bring the proceedings to a halt.
Now on our computer we are missing Andrea de Cesaris, so I would not be surprised that Andrea has come into the pits. There's a red dot behind his name, and that usually indicates he's gone into the pits. I think he's out of the pits now. He is made a pit stop. So Gerhard Berger leads Mika Häkkinen by 12.5 seconds. Then it's Michael Schumacher and Nicola Larini, 13.6 and 13.8 seconds behind race leader Gerhard Berger. The top 6 being completed by Carl Wendlinger and Ukio Katayama in the Tyrrell Yamaha, while in 7th position it's Gianni Morbidelli, and in the pits goes Gerhard Berger. Gerhard Berger will go straight into the pits. Now let's say with this Ferrari pit stop on lap 14, it is Gerhard Berger in the pits. Now is he gonna stay in the lead? Oh, that is a good pit stop. It's 7.7 seconds. That is quicker than the pit stop of Michael Schumacher, and Schumacher just passed Gerhard Berger. If we wait for the picture to stay where it is, I think it's Schumacher just in front of Gerhard Berger.
Well, it was desperately tight as Berger left the pit. Michael Schumacher, under full power, was coming up just about the same point of the circuit, so we have to wait and see what the outcome. But that was a fantastic stop by the Ferrari team. They got in fuel, they changed the 4 tyres. 7.7 seconds for me is the quickest I've seen of this season, and well, certainly the amount of fuel that went into the car indicates to me that Ferrari are clearly going to have 2 more pit stops before we see the finishing flag here for the San Marino Grand Prix.
So on the road, it's a McLaren Peugeot leading as a Grand Prix for the very first time in this season. And Mika Häkkinen leading on the road, but he was a very long way behind Gerhard Berger, even on, and Mika Häkkinen on the restart. So I don't know whether he'll be leading on our computer, but it's that familiar red and white. And is he turning left? Yes, he is. Is Larini turning left? Yes, he is as well. So here's the top 3 on the road: Mika Häkkinen, Nicola Larini and Carl Wendlinger.
But really what we want to get back to is what happened as Berger left the pit. Did Michael Schumacher make it past, or was Berger quick enough on the exit? I suspect not, because although the Ferrari was able to leave the pit lane quickly, the advantage of speed would have laid with Schumacher as he exited much earlier and much faster onto the pit straight.
So, Häkkinen leads Schumacher. There is Michael Schumacher with Nicola Larini in third, Carl Wendlinger fourth, and Gerhard Berger in fifth position. We'll be back after the break here on Eurosport.
Undoubtedly, the McLaren team, having had some problems with the fact that the Peugeot engine has, at this stage of its development, tended to run rather hot. They've been madly trying to get more cooling from the car, putting on radiator exit ducts, and we have to hope that the car can stay reliable throughout, because Häkkinen this time certainly looks on a front-running pace.
Now, Michael Schumacher has got ahead of him. It looks, yeah, it's Christian Fittipaldi in the Footwork Ford, who has not, of course, stopped to take on new tyres and to refuel as Schumacher has. And Schumacher on aggregate now is in second position, although he's still got to get past Fittipaldi in this race.
This really will be quite a headache for Schumacher. They have the strategy of diving into the pits for this fuel so that the car can continue to lap fast, and that advantage can be completely undermined by coming out of the pits behind slower traffic like Fittipaldi there, and if he can't make advantage of that lightweight very quickly, and he really wants to have a go up the inside now, yes, he's going to come by Fittipaldi, then he's got the by Fittipaldi there, and looks like that's Berger.
That's Berger. He's out of the race. Gerhard Berger retires from the San Marino Grand Prix. Well, he's led it, but in circumstances that he wouldn't like. Meantime, I can tell you that the Williams people are preparing for Damon Hill to come in. He's way down the field in 17th place after that nose cone replacement, and Michael Schumacher is slicing his way through. Remember that Gerhard Berger, who had taken the lead from the young German, has now retired from the San Marino Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher, I think, will soon be back in front on aggregate. He's about 1.3 seconds behind.
Imola, but Gerhard Berger, I think, is out of the San Marino Grand Prix. Here, that's the chicane where he went straight on. He then went straight into the pit. The Italian director did not want to see that a Ferrari being retired from this Grand Prix, but Nicola Larini, currently in second place, is the sole remaining Ferrari. There is Olivier Beretta. That's the end of his Grand Prix in the LaRousse Ford. But Mika Häkkinen and Nicola Larini, they're the first two cars on the road, and Ukio Katayama is third on the road, but actually fourth in the race.
Well, Katayama, we have said already this weekend, has been very impressive, and the team really, again, showing a degree of surprise, because Katayama is a driver who appears to be getting better and better. Now, waved yellow flags, also an oil flag being waved at the top of the Peralta corner. So, a warning to the drivers as they come down from Peralta to Acqua Minerale that there's potential oil and water cocktails somewhere on the circuit.
And the pit stop from Damon Hill and the Williams team, and that is after 18 laps. So John, that could, well, they could decide to go for two stops, couldn't they?
Well, Damon making his way back out. And a two-stop, well, it's very marginal. It comes down to how you use your tyres, and if you try to go for two stops, you've got to do more laps with more fuel on board, which means that the performance of the tyre is going to be more compromised. It's a team decision. With one car in the race, I would have hoped they might have decided to do the three-stop option.
Well, there's Mika Häkkinen in the pits on lap 19. So, well, that looks very much like a two-stop race on lap 19 out of, well, let's say 20 as a possible window. That's very generous, Mr. Katayama.
I think that was also very wise by Mr. Katayama, because there's no disrespect to Katayama. Michael Schumacher is by far the quicker package on the circuit this afternoon, and if it wasn't going to be there, it was going to be somewhere else. And I think, again, intelligent piece of driving from Ukio Katayama.
John, the pit stop that Damon Hill had was 4 seconds longer than the pit stop Michael Schumacher had. So could we say that they took on more fuel at Williams?
It would look like they're going to go with the two-stop strategy, and the reason those extra 4 seconds were incurred were undoubtedly to allow the extra quantity of fuel that they would need for a two-stop race to be taken on board. And that's, if you like, the pleasure or the joy of having refueling in a race. It gives teams options which formerly, without refueling, wasn't there. It's a game of chess in effect. Right now, this looks to be the chess master here this afternoon.
Now Gianni Morbidelli goes into the pit, but still 8 tenths away from the fastest lap of the race, and new lap record set of Damon Hill, 1:24.1. But Schumacher leads Nicola Larini by 3.3 seconds, although there we see Nicola Larini, and there we see Michael Schumacher trying to lap Ligier, and well, that went pretty smooth.
Well, again, a good use of the mirrors. A difficult part of the circuit to go so far out to the right isn't the cleanest part of the track. But Schumacher continues on his leading way. On lap 20, hit 3.3 second lead over Nicola Larini in second place. And Okiya Katayama was a further 11.6 seconds, 8.3 seconds behind Michael Schumacher.
Riding with Michael Schumacher, going to that very quick Marlboro chicane. Right, left, accelerate, brake hard, and then it's onto the long straight, get your exit right, and we're at the start of lap 22 out of 61 this afternoon. The gap being 4.2 seconds, and Schumacher's lap time low, 1 minute 25. And
I think what's slightly confusing is, Ella, the time advantage we're seeing is the amalgam of the two heats. It's not as you see it on the racetrack, and I think that watching it back at home, that's the explanation. As it is a two-part race, on the road, it appears that Larini is ahead of Michael Schumacher, but in reality, Michael Schumacher is race leader.
And Nicola Larini has not made a pit stop either. So Larini has got to get into the pit. Now, Ferraris sometimes had very curious. Oh, and here's a problem, or is he? No, he's just taking the Tirov off. But I remember Jean Alesi sometimes going for a one-stop race. You know, I mean, I don't know whether it's wise here, but...
Well, I think in the days when you had active suspension, traction control, and all sorts of electronic aids, you might have gotten away with it, but now without traction control, it's very much more difficult indeed to get the power down without breaking grip. And of course, once you do break, once the grip has been lost, you get wheel spin. That is not something that tires like. And remembering back to the beginning of '93 when we had the revised and reduced tire wheel package, the concern was, is it now in fact too small? Well, in '93 it didn't appear to be a problem, but in '94 it does look to me as if it is right on the margins.
While Christian Fittipaldi has made his pit stop, it is again Mika Häkkinen in third position. Then it's Heinz-Harald Frentzen in fourth. Carl Wendlinger is fifth. Ukio Katayama sixth. Seventh, the man we hear getting out of the pits, Christian Fittipaldi, just in front of teammate Gianni Morbidelli. Ninth is Pierluigi Martini. 10th, Martin Brundle, and 11th position, Mark Blundell. And if you wonder what the progress of Damon Hill is, he is in 14th position, a minute and 16 seconds behind race leader Michael Schumacher. John, would Nicola Larini concede easily to Michael Schumacher? That's, of course, a question to be answered.
I don't think he's going to sort of sit back and say, after you, Michael. But equally, I don't think he's going to make a great issue out of it. And Schumacher is an extremely intelligent driver. He's also a highly gifted one. He's got all the continuity of years at Benetton, whereas Nicola Larini, as Jean Alesi stand-in, he's doing a very, very good job. But I don't see this being a white knuckle job for Schumacher.
And Schumacher has passed Nicola Larini very easy indeed. So leader on the road, leader in the race. Well, there is a pit stop for a Sauber, and that did not seem to go very well. It's Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the pit. And Heinz-Harald Frentzen out of the pit. And there was a fairly good pit stop, 1:43 for the lap and the pit stop, so that is not bad for Heinz-Harald Frentzen.
Well, Michael Schumacher now just in the process of winding down on lap 24 of 61. And Mika Häkkinen running in third place. Really, he will be looking to cut those 20 seconds deficit between himself and Nicola Larini.
We're going to have a break here on Eurosport, and after that we continue with the exciting Imola Grand Prix.
Stopped to change his nose, and of course he came in for tyres and fuel. Hill being pretty happy actually with his setup yesterday when I spoke to him, which was not the case on Friday. The Williams has been really pretty tricky to drive on the limit, difficult to set up perhaps for the first two races, and for this race the team have developed a new nose, a new front wing assembly to make the car less sensitive to set up, to make it easier to drive, providing more confidence, and it certainly seems from qualifying and indeed what we're seeing from Damon Hill, because I think he's still set the fastest lap of the race. It's working here.
David Brabham is still running in the Simtek. He's just been passed by Nicola Larini, and on this, the 25th lap, Schumacher is leading the car you're looking at, Nicola Larini's Ferrari, by 8.5 seconds, ahead of Häkkinen third, Wendlinger fourth, Katayama fifth, and Morbi Bidelli is in 6th place. British drivers, Mark Blundell is 9th in the Tyrrell Yamaha, Martin Brundle is 10th in the McLaren Peugeot. Damon Hill has come up from 17th to 12th as Martin Brundle goes through, and he's having a battle with Pierluigi Martini's Minardi. And actually Brundle is... I'm sorry, I know this is confusing for you, but whilst Brundle is just behind Martini on the road, he's actually ahead of him on aggregate, and that is Bertrand Gachot overcooking things at the Acqua Minerale, right, in the Pacific car. He was the only one to start because his teammate Paul Belmondo did not qualify again. We're watching...
Leader Michael Schumacher on lap 26, and this is Bertrand Gachot, the man who just spun his Pacific Ilmor, and he is out of the San Marino Grand Prix. Well, a man who's here as a visitor is Jos Verstappen, after 2 Grand Prix driving for the Benetton team, back to being a test driver. Jos.
Yeah, we decided to be a test driver, so... But after the accident of JJ, I would take over his place, but now he's fit again, he take over the wheel again, so... There's no problem. I think it's very good for me to be the test driver during the whole year, so I can learn a lot, because what I need is more experience with the car, and how more I drive, how better it is.
Are you driving next week?
Yeah, we're testing here 3 days, so maybe one day I'm testing, so I think it's very good for me.
Well, Pierluigi Martini refused to concede. Martin Brundle got past fairly and squarely as they exited Tamburello, but Martini just did not want to accept his loss of 9th place, 10th place. So Martin Brundle, very mild nudge in the rear from Martini, but no apparent damage, and I'm sure he'll be delighted to see the back. Here we see it again, Brundle clearly, but look at Martini just refusing. Brundle closing the door, and in a sense really giving Martini no options. He had to in fact go left to give him a bit of space. Martini certainly fiery, and well, he's the loser of that little duel, and Martin Brundle, as I say, will be delighted to see the back of him.
The gap between Michael Schumacher and Nicola Larini is now nearly 12 seconds. Mika Häkkinen is in 3rd position, then it's Carl Wendlinger, Ukio Katayama, and Gianni Morbidelli is 6th. Well, we've got to wait for the rest of the field to come by, and we check on our computer what the positions are. Well, that's sliding around a lot at the moment, John.
Indeed, he got into the corner in the back of the car, just about sliding all over the place.
Yeah, he still hasn't made a pit stop yet, has he?
I'm not surprised, but I think maybe very shortly we'll see him coming into the pits. Well, not this time. And I don't believe that Larini's attempting to go for a one-stop race. That would certainly be a strategy that's completely against all odds. Of course, with the choice of different tyre compounds at the restart, it may well be that the decision for Larini was to go with the harder C compound and just do the one-stop.
So we see Johnny Herbert still in the race in 13th position. 2 7th place finishes so far, Johnny. And to be honest, John, we started this second part of the San Marino Grand Prix with 20 cars, and there's still 17 in the race, Eric Bernard being the last of the runners. But a one-stop race maybe for Nicola Larini. And, well, Eddie was going for 3 stops, and he's going for 1, so that's 2 very different options.
Well, I think after the Senna shunt, the whole strategy that people had pre-planned for 61 laps can be readdressed. It can be chosen, I would say, to do the one-stop and go with the harder C compound both ends of the race. Of course, you have to put more fuel into the car to do that, but it does look to me Michael Schumacher being very cautious indeed. Not certain that Andrea de Cesaris in the Jordan Hart ahead of him saw him, and rather than take the chance, watching intently. I'm not sure he's sure that de Cesaris has seen him, but finally has, and de Cesaris takes advantage of Schumacher and slides underneath Olivier Panis.
Actually, that was like a very good move by de Cesaris, John.
Well, it was worrying for Schumacher because he realized that de Cesaris, all his vision was forward. He was watching Panis. He wasn't probably aware of how close Schumacher to him was, and it's again intelligent driving on the part of Schumacher to wait until he was certain that he didn't get nudged in the side as de Cesaris made a quick move on Olivier Panis.
There's a battle for positions and a battle for points. Behind, let's say, Ukyo Katayama, there's quite a few drivers. Morbidelli only 2.4 seconds behind Katayama. Fittipaldi only 1.1 seconds behind teammate Morbidelli. So they're all fighting for position. And with a 2-part race, John, you might have people fighting for position on opposite sides of the circuit.
Indeed, well, there we are, 30 laps to go. And Johnny Herbert going a lap down on race leader Michael Schumacher.
And Nicola Larini is in the pits. Nicola Larini in for his very first tyre stop. Now, there we see the Ferrari, and that takes a long time, John. That looks very much to me like a one-stop race.
I have to agree. I think that was the best part of 120. And David Brabham, he is out, he has gone off, and we're not quite sure which part of the circuit it is. You can see there has been contact somewhere for David Brabham, and fortunately David out of the car, walking away. As we go back to race leader Michael Schumacher. But that one-stop race for Nicola Larini, it's a difficult decision for the driver to accept, because he knows that he's going to have to drive very much more easily. He can't push as hard as he wants to, and he's got to conserve tyres. The extra fuel load, very heavy indeed, and the Ferrari would ordinarily need around about 230 to 40 litres of fuel for this race distance, so 120 litres at least.
Michael Schumacher, race leader, coming into the pits for his second stop of this race. Well, Tyrrell is going very slow, but let's see Michael Schumacher's pit stop. We do not see a clock running, and well, that all looks pretty well with the pit stop from the Benetton team. Michael Schumacher in and out, and that was a very quick stop, because he was only 12 seconds off the pace, basically. So coming into the pit, stopping for fuel, took him 12 seconds.
So all action in the pit lane this afternoon. We've seen an awful lot on the circuit. We did see David Brabham stepping out of his Simtech Ford a few moments ago. We don't know which part of the circuit it was, but he's out of the car and walked away safely.
After 30 laps, you'll see the race classification on your screen. The gap between Schumacher and Larini, 23 seconds. Then it's Hakkinen and Carl Wendlinger, third and fourth. Katayama Morbidelli in fifth and sixth position.
Well, I think there's going to be a little bit of a battle going on between second, third and fourth, because as Larini rejoined the race, heavy with fuel but with fresh tyres, he's got Mika Hakkinen now just 5.2 seconds behind him, and Carl Wendlinger only 2.9 behind Hakkinen. So that, if we have the chance to watch, is going to be, let's say, an amusing part. Johnny Herbert, you can see his head bowed to the right, looking in the mirrors as Hein Harold Frentzen places his Sauber Mercedes underneath him. And that is Frentzen making one more place.
Now the gap between Michael Schumacher and Nicola Larini is 21 seconds. And John, Benetton, I think, has got to make another pit stop. Larini, I think, can go the distance. So it's interesting to keep an eye on the gap between those two. While also now Damon Hill is in 9th position and still the fastest man on the circuit. You don't get any points for being that.
Well, Nicola Larini, the last lap, he'd actually pulled out time on Mika Hakkinen now at 6.2 seconds. So in spite of a very heavy fuel load, those fresh tyres certainly are giving him an additional benefit.
Now the next step for Damon Hill is Martin Brundle in 8th. He's 13 seconds behind them and 2 seconds lap faster, so we'll see, keep an eye on that. Also, I think, John, we have the most unusual top 6 halfway through a race. Schumacher leading, Larini second, Hakkinen third, Wendlinger fourth, Katayama fifth and Morbidelli sixth. Well, I know it's good for my fantasy Grand Prix team.
Well, Imola always does provide unusual results, but this has been a very, very unusual Grand Prix. First with the start line shunt when Pedro Lamy collided with the stationary Benetton Ford of JJ Leto, but then much more seriously when Ayrton Senna had an enormous accident on the 6th lap, all going into the Tamburello corner, and he has been taken away to hospital, and we're still waiting news from Bologna to know about his condition.
There's Schumacher again trying to overtake, or going to overtake, Andrea de Cesaris, running in 13th position in the Jordan. And I think this is the part where Andrea will suffer a little because of not being race fit.
Yeah, I don't think Andrea, sort of maybe over the winter he trained a bit thinking he had to get a drive, and then when he didn't get a drive he probably never bothered. He thought that was really it for him, so I think he's going to be struggling here. I know that we're talking about getting the neck brace to hold his head up, so this is going to be very hard for him, especially with this sort of temperature.
The gap between Damon Hill in 9th and Michael Schumacher in 1st is 1 minute and 11.9 seconds. And, well, there's only 30 laps to go, so I don't think there'll be enough time. And that's the traffic jam for Michael Schumacher. Well, the Cesaris, have you seen him, Andrea? Have you seen Michael? Yes, he has. So Schumacher...
Well, it did take him a little time to see him. In fact, coming out of Tosserheffen, he wasn't aware of Schumacher's presence. That's the second time in the race it's been like that.
We will...
Emphasised about letting Schumacher through, but he's got past.
Indeed, yes, back with Ferrari. But Ferrari did try in the first practice session on the Saturday at Japan a system in which the power output of the engine was reduced in the lower gears as a method of trying to prevent the wheels ever starting to spin. They went to the FIA or FISA, who deemed that that system was not permitted and therefore it was not run further. But it certainly was a rather controversial thing to do, although it seems to be well under control now.
News of the two Williams drivers. We have no more specific news about Ayrton Senna, who was removed to Bologna Hospital by helicopter after an enormous crash on the 6th lap, after which the race was restarted. Damon Hill, who had to come in and have a nose cone replaced after touching Häkkinen at the 3rd start, because the first start was the normal one, the second start was from behind the pace car, the 3rd start was from a standing start, and you're watching the continuation of that now. Damon Hill hit Häkkinen and had to come in for a new nose cone, and as a result of all the tyre changes and refuelling, there is certainly no question of Damon Hill not being on the same lap as the leaders now, although he's 1 minute and 12 seconds behind on a lap that's taking about 1 minute 26 seconds, which is Schumacher's time. Schumacher is leading on lap 34 by 24 seconds from Nicola Larini, and as a matter of interest, the lap record here is held by Riccardo Patrese, 1992, in the Williams Renault, 1 minute 26.1, when the car had the initial active suspension and other goodies that Williams were using. And so Schumacher has just broken the lap record officially. He's just gone round in 1 minute 26.062, which is about a tenth of a second.
Enzo e Dino Ferrari in Imola, Italy. He leads Nicola Larini, who crosses start-finish very shortly with his V12 Ferrari. Larini in 2nd place, and if he stays there, that would be very easily his best result ever in a Formula 1 Grand Prix. Mika Häkkinen is in 3rd. 4th is Carl Wendlinger. 5th, Ukio Katayama. And in 6th position, Gianni Morbidelli. And Ayrton Senna is in Bologna Hospital, and basically, John, in a critical condition, and that's most of the news we've got.
Indeed, and obviously that was the reason that Senna was removed from the circuit directly to hospital. It was considered to be the correct move to get him into a medical unit such as in Bologna as quickly as possible, to give him the maximum amount of attention that is in the hospital.
While Damon Hill crosses start-finish, he's still in 9th position. Michael Schumacher is going into that final chicane and completing lap 36 out of 61. So there's 25 laps to go in this San Marino Grand Prix, a very warm San Marino Grand Prix, and a Grand Prix, well, who would have thought we're going to have a weekend like we've just had with the Formula 1 family. But Michael Schumacher leads it quite handsomely, and it's Andrea de Cesaris gone into the pit, and we can hear him go out of the pits again as well. So that's a tyre stop. And Heinz Harald, Carl Wendlinger comes in the pit.
Wendlinger was in 6th place, and Gianni Morbidelli was some 10 seconds behind, and Morbidelli now has taken away that final point spot as Carl Wendlinger rejoins the circuit. So we're going to see a lot of the mid-range positions changing as pit stops come and go, and as the truth of this Grand Prix unfolds with the strategy teams have chosen to go with, it's really going to be, I think, Allard, not until we're into the final 5 or maybe 8 laps of this Grand Prix that we will really know what the outcome is predictably going to be.
Well, Mika Häkkinen running in 3rd position, some 35 seconds behind race leader Michael Schumacher and some 6 seconds behind Nicola Larini. And, well, Peugeot before the race said we just would like to finish, and a finish would be a bonus. What if they get on the rostrum?
Well, Imola, we have said it throughout the weekend, and Mika Häkkinen into the pits. This is his second stop. So the McLaren team putting in more of the Shell fuel. 4 Goodyear tyres on. Quick stop on lap 38. End of 37th lap beginning.
Well, 7.7 seconds, John. Again, a very good stop. Under 8 seconds, and I think that's going to be the mark here at Imola. Like, let's see who can be under 8 seconds for a pit stop.
The teams, since it was known that refueling was going to be permitted, have been working and practicing furiously, and it's now become as slick an act as we've seen over many years when we were only permitted to have wheel changes. And the options really that teams are looking to is to try and put in as little fuel as they need to do, bearing in mind what circuit conditions are like and what tyre wear or tyre performance on a given track represents.
It still has 16 cars out of the 20 that started this second part on the circuit. And I think, John, when we talk about a race of attrition, usually everybody stays on the circuit, but there's still the most important laps still have to be run, I suppose.
Well, it's normally towards the end of this race, and Imola 20 laps to go, that the problems that we have seen in the past rear their heads.
John, I'm missing Michael Schumacher. Michael Schumacher is gone. Where is Michael Schumacher? The camera can't find him. I can't see him in the pit lane, but he's definitely not crossed the start-finish line. Nicola Larini is leading the San Marino Grand Prix at this moment. Michael Schumacher is gone. He's dropping down the leaderboard. He's stopped somewhere on the circuit. And I must say, Jonathan, I don't think I say too many bad words about the director when I say, as usual, he's missed it again.
Well, we have missed a great deal of important action, and certainly Michael Schumacher now registering 8th, and it's going to go lower and lower.
So, this is a turn up for the books. There is Pierluigi Martini in the gravel. Now, did Michael Schumacher had anything to do with that, or did Martini had anything to do with Schumacher? Who knows? But Michael Schumacher is not on the circuit. It's Nicola Larini leading the Grand Prix. Oh, he's back again. Sorry. Thank you. Where did he go, though?
I think
where did he come back from?
Well, either there's been a fault in our computer and we haven't got vision out onto the circuit. Certainly the director has been following Nicola Larini, and I think he feels the same thing as well, that he's got a Ferrari and an Italian driver leading this Grand Prix. For a few moments, our computer had Michael Schumacher dropping down like it had a virus in it, but suddenly Schumacher pops up to take the lead once again, but we're not getting sight of Schumacher anywhere on the circuit. Martin Brundle into the pits in his McLaren Peugeot. Brundle was an 8, 19 seconds ahead of Frentzen. If he does his job properly and gets in and out quickly, and certainly McLaren have been doing a good job in these stops. And look, the rear wheels, this is, get the car, get the brakes on, get the brakes on, what are you doing? Looks to me like he's got a clutch problem, because otherwise it is not normal to have a car jacked up like that, and I suspect that that is the end. Watch out everybody, they're going to drop the car off the jacks, build up the revs, and there it goes, and there is Michael Schumacher. Well, that must have given a few palpitations to those members of the Benetton team who are not on the pit wall, but it all appears to have been an error. Michael Schumacher, 35.124 seconds in the lead from second place man Nicola Larini.
And Larini crossing start-finish now, 36 seconds behind. And John's laughing at me. I suppose I did make a fool out of myself, but he was dropping down the list, John. I can't help it.
Well, I mean, literally, you know, when you get a computer virus, the way the numbers just fall off the screen, well, that's what it was doing with Michael Schumacher. Literally by the second the positions were dropping, something must have gone wrong, And anyway, Schumacher still in the lead. There is confirmation, 36.166 seconds over Nicola Larini in second place in his second Grand Prix for Ferrari as a stand-in for Jean Alesi, and I think Ferrari personnel must be truly delighted with that performance.
So the top 6 to go through it yet again is Schumacher, Larini, Katayama. I mean, well done. Long time since we've had a Japanese driver on the rostrum. Off the top of my head, as the one and only time, that was while Gianni Morbidelli is going very slow. Was it Aguri Suzuki, Japanese Grand Prix?
1990.
Thank you very much. Morbidelli retires from this race, as he done in quite a few of the previous races. The end of the race, he retired. There is second place driver Nicola Larini. Larini standing in for Jean Alesi at this Grand Prix and the Pacific Grand Prix. Born in 1964, and he's raced in 43 Grand Prix previously, and his best result so far has been for 5th position.
Well, Alar, just with that little bit of information about Larini, the year of his birth, 1964, makes me feel rather sort of elderly, because that was the year of my first motor race. So time does pass by quickly.
Yes, Eddie, I think you should make that remark on television. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, it's great to see Ukio up there. Whenever he came into Formula One, he got a very hard time. He had a lot of spins, and I can understand it, because he was pushing very hard. And the Formula One car, the tires in Formula One are a lot different from the tires we use in Japan. And in Japan, the car slides a lot better. While Formula One, it just snaps on you, and it's obviously taken him a bit of time to get used to that, but now, you know, his talent's coming through.
Eddie, you probably raced against Kiya Katayama in Formula 3000 in Japan. I mean, what sort of competitor was he there?
Well, actually, it was my first year out in Japan, and he won the championship. He was very strong at Suzuka circuit, where the Grand Prix is. Other places wasn't so strong, but Suzuka, basically, I think he won 3 of the 4 races.
And also, I think John Katayama, who's been driving in the shadow of Aguri Suzuki a little bit, and now being the only Japanese driver, off he goes.
Well, the Tyrrell team were delighted the other day when they were testing at Silverstone, and Ken Tyrrell came up to me with that familiar grin of his and said, "Who was quickest, John? Who was quickest the other day testing at Silverstone?" And before I had a chance to reply, he just couldn't resist it. Ukiya. And I think the Tyrrell team have found a little star in Kiya Katayama. Now, I know we have criticised him on occasion, but it is his second full year now of Grand Prix racing. And again, this thing about continuity for a team, it's as important for the team as it is for the driver. But also, let's give credit to Yamaha and to John Judd, because they have developed this V10 engine. It's been improving by the Grand Prix, to the point, in fact, during one of the sessions over the weekend, the Tyrrell was the quickest car at the end of the straight.
And Ukio now dropping back to 5th position, having made a pit stop. So, well, it is lap 43, and people that did go for the free stop race, John, I think are just about to make their last pit stop very shortly.
Well, this is a little busy section of traffic. Johnny Herbert, of course, down in 12th place. Mark Blundell, who has been racing with Herbert. And now the battle, Mika Häkkinen. Carl Benlinger there have been separated by about 2 seconds.
Damon Hill, in the meantime, is in 8th position. And Damon must have made a pit stop like race leader Michael Schumacher. In the pits. And, well, that was a very casual pit stop, John.
I think it was more careful than casual, but, you know, the team and Schumacher got a comfortable lead. It was 42 seconds. Larini, we don't think is going to make another pit stop, but Schumacher now out with his last load of fuel on fresh tyres will have no problem opening up that lead.
Well, saying it was a careful pit stop, again, the whole procedure took around 13 seconds.
You know, even sitting in the booth, when a pit stop is maybe 1 second slower than the previous one, that 1 second is a visible difference.
He's 16 laps to go when we cross start finish in this San Marino Grand Prix.
Well, here's a little bit of a problem for Häkkinen and for Wendlinger, because Johnny Herbert's pretty quick down the straight with the Mugen V10. Mark Blundell with the Yamaha V10 equally very quick down the straight. Häkkinen is quicker in a lap, but he can't get the speed where it counts to make the challenge to get past and to pick up his own momentum. And equally, right in his gearbox, Carl Wendlinger with the Ilmor V10. Well, Blundell finally makes his way past Johnny Herbert as Herbert's tail wags on the grass. But still, the battle for 11th and 12th place, preoccupying Johnny Herbert. Now Mika Häkkinen looking to slide down. Johnny Herbert lets him through. He has lost ground, but very good use of the mirrors.
And there's a lot of traffic on that circuit, and Johnny Herbert being caught right in the middle there. Herbert in 12th position, a lap down, and now 1 second behind the man who just overtook him, and that's Mark Blundell. Schumacher, Larini, Häkkinen, that's the top three, as it's been for the last, well, 15 minutes or so. Then Carl Wendlinger, Ukyo Katayama and Christian Fittipaldi completing the point scorers. And currently in 7th position is Damon Hill. Well, Damon is now running a low or high 25, and I must say, let's see what Michael Schumacher does on this new set of tires. But Damon John consistently being the quickest driver out there, I must say. I mean, with all respect to Michael and the Benetton team, they're leading this race fairly handsomely, but Damon is putting in very good lap times.
Well, the Benetton team are controlling Michael Schumacher's pace. They know he has such an advantage over Nicola Larini. It's over 31.8 seconds now. There's no need to drive at the limit to try and finish 2 minutes or whatever it would be ahead of Larini. In the case of Damon Hill, of course, having had all those problems at the very early part of the race, he is looking to get into the point. He's currently some 9 seconds behind Christian Fittipaldi, and with the laps remaining, that ought to be fairly easily gobbled up. And then the sights will be on Ukyo Katayama, who's only a further 4 seconds. So potentially 4th place is available for Damon.
John, I think out of this three, there's one engine definitely not sounding very good. I don't know whether it's Blundell, Häkkinen or Wendlinger, but there's one engine that doesn't sound 100%. Could be crack exhaust, by the way. But
well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's just what I was going to say. Very often an exhaust pipe, the primary pipe, does crack, or it might even break, and it has a small effect on performance, but it makes it sound awful. Well, there is 7th place man Damon Hill, and the person that he is charging after, Christian Fittipaldi, now some 6.2 seconds ahead. 6.234, that's the difference.
And the thing is that most of the lap times of nearly all the top 6 drivers gone up dramatically, and this man, Damon Hill, just keeps driving low 25s, high 24s, and well, it's a good package still. It's just Williams needs to turn their luck around, I suppose, a little bit, John.
Well, certainly for Damon, he had contact with Michael Schumacher at the restart into Tosser-Hep, and that sent him straight into the pits to have a new nose section fitted to his Williams. And very competitive it was in that restart into Tosser. There was no quarter given, and Damon quite rightly challenged, but the door very firmly, and in the mind of Michael Schumacher equally fairly, shut in his face.
And there's a car stopped down here in the pit, and
it's a mechanic, Larini or somebody has come into the pit. There has been an accident, and there it is. A car has either come in or gone out of the pit, and there's been an accident in the pit lane. One of the Ferrari mechanics has been injured by a car, or was that a car?
Or a wheel.
Contact or something, we can't tell, but there has been an incident in the pit lane. One of the Ferrari mechanics who was standing in place, in fact a couple of them have been knocked down, and now pandemonium is breaking out in the pit lane. A car without a wheel, there was a wheel to be seen bouncing. We don't know whether that was the result of something in the pit lane or something on the circuit coming into the pit lane. Well, there it is, it's Andrea De Cesar's car.
I think
the right rear
Minardi.
wheel.
It's Michele Alboretto's Minardi, I think, John.
Yes, indeed. The right rear of the Minardi detached, and it may well have been that on the going out of the pits, that right rear wheel may have come off. It may not have been attached correctly. Certainly, engineers in the Ferrari team have been injured in that incident. Now calling for the medical team to get these mechanics as quickly as possible and off the pit lane to the medical centre.
Just when you thought we've had every sort of accident we could think of, John, this weekend. Lap 48, and Michael Schumacher leads Nicola Larini by 35.4 seconds. Well, that's very good, keeping the cameras away. With 10 laps to go, I like to see where the cars on the circuit are, to be honest, because Schumacher leads Nicola Larini, and if things don't change, Michael Schumacher is going to win his third Grand Prix of the 1994 Grand Prix season. And there we see Damon Hill. Oh, was that smoke from an engine, or was it smoke from a tyre?
That to me looked like an engine smoke, or certainly a fluid smoke. It didn't appear to be the result of a locking wheel, but it was so brief that maybe we will get the replay of the moment. Breaking down into that chicane. Downhill braking always very difficult, so it is possible that a rear wheel, which might be slightly more unloaded, could just drag on and cause the lock-up, but we have to hope to see it again in replay.
There's two mechanics being hit, John, by the car, Michele Alboretto's car. Apparently the wheel came loose and it got a bit out of control, hit the mechanics, and then the wheel came off, which was the apparent reason of Michele losing control of that car. Well, there's some proper motor racing going on.
Well, that's Mark Blundell being another lap down to Carl Wendlinger, who's battling with Mika Häkkinen for third place. And Wendlinger really wanted to squeeze through and not lose contact. Häkkinen, of course, was wishing that Wendlinger would be delayed, give him a chance just to catch his breath and reassess the situation. On lap 51, 10 to go. The gap just 2 seconds.
Well, there's the battle we see for the last position, podium position, I should say. Mika Häkkinen and Carl Wendlinger. Then that's Ukio Katayama, Christian Fittipaldi in 6th, and Damon Hill in 7th position. It seems to me, John, that out of these two, Wendlinger is definitely the quicker of the two. But that's the car that's sounding not right.
Yes, indeed, and it's Wendlinger's Ilmor V10, which we would think is the more powerful engine of the two, but in fact it's been pretty much equalised by that. Here we see again, the wheel bounces down, but already the damage has been done. The car swerved into Look, again, watching as the car comes out, coming into view, suddenly swings wildly to the right as the rear wheel starts to wobble, then comes off, the wheel bounces out of the pit lane, and an awful sight once again we have been seeing at Imola.
And there's Andrea de Cesaris out of the Grand Prix. There's bits of car. I don't know where it is. There's a mark on the wall. Is that San Marino? No, it's not. I don't know where it is, but Andrea trying to get out of the car, and it's a damaged Jordan.
Yes, left side, and let's have a look and see where we are on the circuit. It's difficult. Once again, it looks to me as if it was coming out of Peralta, coming down the hill, that he may have lost it, but again, the camera position not clear in our chance to recognise the part of circuit. Well, I think it is yellow, static yellow flags as we come up to Tamburello, and once again the awful sight of seeing a car with a rear wheel coming loose as it exits, and now going into magnification as if it wasn't enough. Of course, the Ferrari mechanics would be standing in position in the event that Larini did want to make a pit stop. The yellow line divides the work area from the part of the circuit that or the part of the pit lane that in effect is considered to be the racetrack. But when a wheel nut or a wheel comes off, there's nothing that Alboreto was able to do. Just another sad aspect of an already extremely sad San Marino Grand Prix.
We just saw Damon Hill passing Johnny Herbert. Damon now 0.9 of a second behind fifth place man Christian Fittipaldi. So Damon, there we see that gap. Although we don't see Christian, I mean, Damon very close to them. Riding with Michael Schumacher, going down to Rivazza, and at the end of this lap, the 53rd, there's 8 laps to go for the Benetton team and another victory. Well, John, I think Damon's slowing down pretty much. Maybe he's conceded that position. I mean,
I think, Allard, it could be a number of things. That one of which is that that Damon, you know, he's had a strategy for the race. If, for example, they thought he'd use more fuel than was projected, they may decide just to say, well, you know, take it easy. The time that you would lose by...
Expect him soon to catch and pass sixth place man Damon Hill.
It certainly is that. It certainly is a lot faster than anybody, but it's still some 3 seconds slower than he went in qualifying, and with just 6 laps to go here, he can be expected to have a pretty low fuel load. So he's probably, by his terms, relatively cruising, and with a Grand Prix car, with a Grand Prix driver at the wheel, once one is 1 or 2 seconds off maximum pace, it really is pretty straightforward to drive at that speed. It does not feel particularly quick to the driver. He's very much coasting along and pacing himself, and I know that Benetton team had a little bit of a concern about reliability here when the Z-Tech engine first came out. They came testing here and had 1 or 2 problems with it, as one would have expected, but they've certainly done their homework. They've got it together. This is a stressful circuit for engines, but he certainly seems to be showing no signs whatsoever of any problems at the moment.
You watch Nicola Larini, who is indeed going to bring a Ferrari home in second place for the second race in succession if he can keep it going for another 5 laps, including the one he's on. That is Häkkinen, who is third. Damon Hill has made the fastest lap of the race so far, 1.8 seconds inside the previous lap record, and he's now up into 5th position, so he's going to get at least 2 World Championship points if he finishes where he is now at worst, and that means to say that he would move up to 2nd position in the World Championship ahead of the absent Rubens Barrichello. That's Wendlinger, who is in 4th place still, chasing Mika Häkkinen, and the stretcher is still in the pit lane.
Sauber, interestingly, or rather Ilmor, the Mercedes-Benz engine manufacturer there. They tried pneumatic valves for the first time of the engine's development on Friday. They had a few problems with it, and it's been reverted back to the older specification engine with metal springs for valve springs. The benefit of the pneumatics being that one can rev an engine higher, and of course the higher you can rev an engine, the more power it can produce.
And it looked to me like a Lotus mechanic, not a Ferrari mechanic, judging by the overalls. And I noticed that there were Lotus mechanics as the ambulance comes into the pit lane in attendance as the stretcher was wheeled away. Well, I think as far as everybody here is concerned, the finish of the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix cannot come a second too soon. Wendlinger is now going quicker and is up into 4th position. Down to 6th on aggregate has gone Damon Hill. This is a replay of what happened with that bouncing wheel. You see the crowd running as Alboreto offline by virtue of the fact that his wheel had come off, and he would probably, even though the Minardi team is only about 2/3
out of the pit lane, but of course those engineers and mechanics that were standing there, and it does seem unfortunately as well a member of the Lotus team has been involved, and Christian Fittipaldi in the gravel trap at Tossa after a fine drive, and now on the long walk back home.
So Christian Fittipaldi was in 5th place again, but now it's very definitely Damon Hill in 5th position. Well, Carl Wendlinger, well, his exhaust might be cracked, John, but he's just done his fastest lap of the race so far, with 3 laps to go.
Well, he's certainly not going to let Mika Häkkinen think he's got a 3rd place and podium finish in the bag. But getting up to Mika is going to be one thing. With an engine that is down in power because of an exhaust problem, an entirely different one.
There's Michael Schumacher completing lap 56. Passing Ukyo Katayama, who is now back in 6th position. And Katayama only 0.7 behind Damon Hill, and Damon slowed down on that lap. I don't know why, but he has anyway. Carl Wendlinger some 80 seconds in front of Damon Hill, so 5th place probably as far as Damon will get this afternoon, and that's an afternoon of very hard work indeed. Well, with a couple of laps to go, and of course the race not being 61 laps because of the extra parade lap we had and an extra lap we did before the red flags came out, so there's 59 laps. Is Carl Wendlinger getting closer, I would say?
Well, I think he's getting closer in parts of the circuit, but again, when it comes to out-and-out horsepower, you can hear how flat his V10 Mercedes engine sounds. That is, as we suspect, the cause of a broken exhaust, a primary pipe, and it's on the long parts of the fast parts of the circuit where Mika Häkkinen is able to catch his breath, and equally McLaren will be telling Häkkinen, okay, you got Wendlinger on your tail, but he's got a mechanical problem, so just try and maintain that 2-second gap that 2.9 it is on that last lap.
Well, Michael Schumacher being on his last lap, and well, anything but mechanical failure will stop Michael Schumacher from winning the San Marino Grand Prix. But John, I'm not sure he'll be happy with the 10 points, but it'll be a finish for a sad weekend.
Well, Benetton, Schumacher and Ford have done everything that was asked of them, but of course it's in very, very sad circumstances indeed, and we're still waiting to hear news from the Bologna hospital regarding Senna. He was taken there after that massive accident very early in the Grand Prix, but nonetheless Schumacher, as our other drivers here, they come to race, and that's what they're required to do.
And the last we heard, he was in very critical condition. while Michael Schumacher will win the third Grand Prix of the 1994 Grand Prix season. He crosses the line now. The last lap, of course, fairly slow. In second place, there he is, if he finishes the lap, and that is easily his best Formula One result ever, and a good result for Ferrari is going to be Nicola Larini in second place.
And while all that was going on, Akira Katayama has regained fifth place from Damon Hill, and Damon certainly unable to defend the place he took away from Katayama some laps ago. And again, an indication that I suspect that he's probably very marginal on fuel, and the prospect of an extra pit stop would have offset the additional performance that he would have had.
Nicola Larini second in this Grand Prix. Now, is it going to be Mika Häkkinen or Carl Wendlinger? That'll be Mika Häkkinen finishing third for McLaren. In fourth position is Carl Wendlinger. And look, John, I mean, with all the problems we've had this weekend, when you look on the main straight, there's the crowd. I mean, they're walking on the circuit already. I mean, that's madness.
Well, it's obviously because the performance that Nicola Larini has given all these thousands of Italian and Ferrari fans, and they're delighted, and he has done a truly outstanding job for Ferrari. He was certainly, in his first race 2 weeks ago, very impressive, but here really he will deserve every single plaudit he will get this afternoon, tomorrow, and undoubtedly for the remainder of this week, and has proved to be a very able stand-in indeed for the injured Jean Alesi.
Christian Fittipaldi being taken back to the pit by Heinz-Harald Frentzen.
And that's something I have to say is very risky. You know, you jump on the side of a competitor's car. He's probably been driving at 190 or 200 miles an hour for 60 odd laps. Doing 80 mile an hour seems like you're stood still. You put the brakes on and you just slide off the car. It is so difficult to hang on. And I know that it's always seen as a friendly gesture, but Carl Wendlinger really does have to take it very, very slowly indeed to ensure that Fittipaldi does stay on the car.
So Damon Hill did finish sixth in the end. That's 1 point, and that is joint second place in the World Championship, and that's a joint second place with Eddie's teammate Rubens Barrichello. Well, I don't think Rubens would have thought he would still be second in the World Championship after this Grand Prix.
Yeah, it's been a very, very eventful weekend, very sad in many respects, and I hope Senna, obviously, news from the hospital, I hope that's good, and there's a great pity about a friend of mine for 10 years, Roland Ratzenberger, you know, but it's just one of them things. Motor racing's dangerous, and the drivers accept that danger, and occasionally it's going to happen, and it's just a great pity it happened so early in his career.
Well, Michael Schumacher into the Parc Fermé, and that's probably Pedro Lemi's Lotus or Ayrton Senna's Williams under the canvas. And here really Niall Larini has to be very careful indeed. We've had an incident-packed weekend, not just on the racetrack but sadly in the pit lane, where Michele Alboretto's Minardi lost its right rear wheel and the car clipped, or in fact more than clipped, hit a number of the mechanics and engineers, obviously heavily indeed. But the crowds rushing across, their joy of course solely focused on Ferrari and Larini, and they are here in their thousands.
Oh dear, I mean, I'm glad we're not on that side, John, to be honest.
Well, I think this is something that is going to be very difficult to control, because there's no security down there, or doesn't appear to be, as Larini makes his way back with the prancing horse. And as I said, he's got to be very careful that nobody trips or falls as he makes his way back.
There you go, Eddie. Thank you very much. See you later.
Well, those are scenes reminiscent of Monza. I don't think I've quite seen such jubilation here at Imola before. And This is going to be the new hero in Italy.
30 points, maximum score for Michael Schumacher. There we see it on our screen. 7 points for Barrichello and Hill. Then it's Gerhard Berger with 6, still at second place from Ida. Katayama, Wendlinger, Hakkinen all have 4. And 3 points for Christian Fittipaldi, 2 for Frentzen and 1 for Comas. And if we go down the full result list after the top 6, Frentzen 7th, Brundle 8th, Blundell 9th, 10th Johnny Herbert, 11th Olivier Panis, 12th Eric Bernard, and 13th classified was Christian Fittipaldi. Well, John, if everybody goes that way, we might be able to get out the other way by the time we have to go.
A fine result in terms of performance, but obviously tinged with sadness over the weekend, and certainly reflecting upon Ayrton Senna's accident. But Benetton and Ford and Michael Schumacher have done an outstanding job, and 30 points, a maximum score from 3 Grand Prix. That's what they came here to do. Obviously not in the circumstances. So the podium prepared for Michael Schumacher, Nicola Larini and Mika Hakkinen. As all around the circuit, the enthusiasm for Larini's second place just overcomes, in some cases, probably judgment. And really, the security here fighting almost a losing battle, but now certainly under the podium, control has been restored.
So there's the rostrum with the champagne and the trophies. And where are the drivers? Nicola Larini in second, Mika Hakkinen third, but of course race winner Michael Schumacher, race winner and world championship leader. John, look at Monaco. I don't suppose Ayrton Senna will be racing there.
Well, there we have the 3 podium finishers and Nicola Larini, and of course Flavio Briatore representing the Benetton team.
The national anthem's being played for the Benetton team and Michael Schumacher, world championship leader. And John, who's going to stop him now?
Well, there are 13 more Grand Prix, so there's a lot more motor racing, and I think it would be wrong to be saying that this is the end of the championship. Undoubtedly, Ayrton Senna is going to be out for a number of races, but we have to look elsewhere. I don't know who Williams might put in as a replacement. And I suppose speculation could be fairly wild, but there's a man who's truly delighted and a very well earned and justified podium position. Mika Häkkinen equaling his best finish, third in Japan last year, and a great result for McLaren, for Peugeot, who are on just at the beginning of their development program, and one I'm sure we'll see on the podium many times in the future.
There's all the Italian fans, and John, I think it's a good gesture from the drivers not to spray the champagne.
Absolutely, I think that it would have been out of place for the champagne to be sprayed, and out of respect to Roland Ratzenberger, who lost his life here in qualifying yesterday afternoon, and also for those people that were injured in the pit lane, for Ayrton Senna, who is critically injured and in hospital. I think that that was the correct step to take. Well, it's always a pretty unpleasant sight to see the wheel of a racing car running loose like that. And of course the pit lanes themselves are very busy. Looking back at Andrea de Cesaris, his car parked just after Peralta, the corner that leads downhill into the chicane at Equiminerale. And now the euphoria of the spectators here at Imola beginning to dampen down as the podium ceremony is finished, and the drivers will now make their way into the press conference, and we have to wait and see what their observations and comments are, certainly regarding the race, and undoubtedly in the case of Michael Schumacher, who was immediately behind Senna when he went off, he may well be able to shed some insight into what caused that car mysteriously to leave the track.
Well, news coming back via the news like Reuters and AFP saying Ayrton Senna has had surgery. He's very critically injured. His heart stopped beating for a while, but they got it going again, and he is injured in hospital. And let's wish Ayrton Senna all the best from this commentary position, and not only Ayrton Senna but everybody involved with all the accidents and incidents that happened here in Imola this weekend.
Well, this is the scene as the fans now leave Imola for 1994, but still on the pit lane, thousands of people milling around, and teams very quickly closing down the doors to their garages and removing all their timing equipment and computing equipment from the pit lane, getting it away as quickly as they can.
Sorry, I'm not sure. I don't think we're going to see a press conference actually after the Grand Prix, because I haven't seen any pictures from the press room yet, and everybody is going home, and then usually they should have arrived in the press room already, and I'm not sure whether the drivers are going there. They should do, but I don't think they will.
Well, the press room is quite a distance, in fact, from the podium, and with the amount of people that are milling around, it may take them a few minutes to get there, but it is conceivable that the press conference may have been deferred. Well, this is the moment that occurred after the restart, and Senna's car just